you for listening to PRN, the Progressive Radio Network.
Live from New York City, it's the Gary Null Show. And now, your host, Gary Null.
Hi, everyone. I'm Gary Null, broadcasting video streaming live from our studios in New York City. We're heard all over the world. And if you'd like to watch this, and you've been watching it up to this point or the last few days on Facebook, we're going to be moving that over to, and have, to YouTube. And if you're into health and nutrition, we're going to give you a lot of it. And then we're going to take on some other issues. For example, on public health issues, we're going to look at Wi-Fi and cell phones and those cell towers. And what do they do to us? What do they do to our brains? We need to know this. Now, whether you ultimately choose not to be concerned or concerned, at least you'll have these very important facts today. Also, I'm going to spend a few moments talking about an article I read by Jennifer Stitt of Aeon. Before you can be with others, first learn to be alone. The power of solitude. So I'm going to talk about that. Also, from the environment, the new information from our National Academy of Science, just to put it in perspective, that is the most respected and important, the final arbiter of everything scientific in the United States is the National Academy of Sciences. Quote, warning of sixth mass extinction, scientists implore global action. So now they've put it official. We're into a mass extinction era, the sixth in the history of humans being on this planet. And even before, and what are we doing about it? So we're going to take a look at that. Also, I've been telling you that the Larsen C shelf, which is about the size of Delaware, over 110 miles long, would break off. Last night it broke off. So now it's no longer attached to Antarctica, which means that all that ice behind it that was being prevented from going into the water is now going into the water. And you're also in what is known as chaos theory. There is no person on Earth who can accurately predict how much ice will break off, how fast it will break off, because you have feedback loops that are not predictable. And throwing in a little wrench into this is there's now massive rainstorms over Antarctica that we've never seen before because of global warming. So imagine that it's warm. Imagine now you have rain hitting ice, which will melt it, and that means more calving, the breaking off of ice. I'll get to that. Also, if time permits today, in the second part of our program, Thinking Dangerously, the Role of Higher Education in Authoritarian Times by Professor Henry Giroux. And I'm going to give you some video clips. One about milk. Now, growing up, we all were encouraged to drink milk. And whether it was homogenized or not, where I came from, we preferred it non-homogenized. So every morning, the milkman would put in that little container outside, gave it some insulation, would put 2 quarts of milk, and their cream was on the top. And that was the tastiest part, because my mom would take that cream and mix it into my oatmeal and put some cinnamon. That's primarily what I ate. My other brothers liked bacon and eggs or sausage. And now we know a lot more about milk. And we're going to play a video clip. It's not long, but it says if milk commercials were honest. So you're going to watch it. So if you're watching us over Progressive Radio Network, PRM.FM, you'll be able to see it. We'll download it onto YouTube later. We have hundreds and hundreds of films on YouTube, by the way. There's a public service. We always like to start with something very positive, informing us of what choices we can make to stay healthier. For example, I'm counseling someone yesterday afternoon who is terminally ill, and he was simply not aware the drinking soft drinks and sodas that are high in fructose corn syrup could damage his liver. And of course, he had non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, which is an epidemic in the United States. And when I explained what was in a soft drink and how that would impact the liver, he said, I didn't know that. Well, the doctors got me on 17 different medications. No one ever said anything about stop and drink. I have not been told to stop drinking soft drinks. And I said, what else? What about your diet? Well, they didn't say anything. They just said moderation. And then he's eating the hot dogs, the hamburgers, the french fries, the stuff that causes disease. This is the latest study. This is from the University of California at Davis. This is published in the American Journal of Pathology, highly respected journal. I'm giving you this information so that you see that the information I share on this program, today and forever, is always based upon quality, independent science, not coming from industry. Quote, a new study in the American Journal of Pathology reports in this laboratory experiment that mice fed a Western diet, that's your typical American and English diet, which is high in fat and sugar, resulted in hepatic inflammation, that's your liver, especially in males. Moreover, liver inflammation was most pronounced in Western diet-fed male mice that also lacked a particular receptor. The study is important because it links diet to changes in the gut microbiota, as well as the bile acid profile, opening the possibility that probiotics and bile acid receptor agonists may be useful for the prevention and treatment of hepatic inflammation and progression into advanced liver disease such as cancer of the liver. So, here's the message here. Your liver does two primary things. First, the liver helps cleanse the body along with the kidneys. It takes these toxins and takes them through, and it conjugates them, meaning it brings them together so your body can purge them out. And you'll purge out in your feces a lot of dead bacteria that the body no longer needs, undigested fibrous materials, dead cells, generally coming from the intestine itself, but also impurities. That's good that you can cleanse this. But the liver also does something that is essential for health. It allows the nutrients that we take in to be reformulated in the liver so it can be in its usable form when it gets to the cell through the bloodstream. For example, if you take a B complex, it'll simply say vitamin B6, pyridoxine. But the body can't use B6. It doesn't use it. The liver has to convert it from vitamin B6 pyridoxine into pyridoxal 5-phosphate. Same way with ascorbic acid. It has to be converted into ascorbate. So there's all this manipulation of nutrients into the most bioavailable form where the cell is able to use them. So when you take chemotherapy, you lay waste, you play havoc with the liver. That's one of the reasons that Nicholas Gonzalez, Dr. Gonzalez, a cancer doctor and an immunologist, did not choose most of the time to work with cancer patients who had had chemotherapy. He'd prefer patient didn't, because the liver is essential for building up the immune system. And by the way, when you're drinking soft drinks and coffee, coffee's diuretic, and it flushes out micronutrients your body needs, like selenium that you need to prevent cancer, and copper in small amounts, which is still essential. So the more coffee you drink, the more diuretic your body is, the more acidic your body is, the more likely you are to suffer from pain by drinking coffee. Let's put it another way. If coffee were invented for the first time today, it would never be allowed, nor would sugar, processed sugars, because they're toxic. Be that as it may, it's showing you that almost everything that we consume in the Western diet adversely affects our liver, and that contributes to a precancerous liver, where there's a lot of fat in the liver. If you eat a lot of fat in a meal, where do you think that fat goes to? When you watch all these cooking shows, every single one that I've seen shows you eating the worst foods imaginable. And now they're not just showing you bad foods, but it has been a highly competitive, there's a clock and you got to get a dish and they're competing and there's one good. It's like a Roman amphitheater. It's like thumbs up, thumbs down, you're going to die, or you pass on to the next stage and become the best chef. Real chefs would never disgrace themselves by appearing in public like a bunch of dancing clowns. Could you imagine having a variety show where you had people from the New York Ballet, the Philharmonic, and if you didn't win, you were out of ballet. If you didn't sing better in the competition, being judged by a bunch of nut jobs that you could never sing again. We have made everything so foolishly dystopian. We're like a bad sci-fi movie. Our whole society, I'm making no exceptions, everything in our society needs to be re-examined. And how do you re-examine these things? And that brings me to this. You find the quiet moments. One of the reasons I've always lived on a farm or a ranch since I've been in New York City is because the power of being able to communicate with nature quietly. New York has a lot of wonderful opportunities and people, but quiet it is not. But when you're alone in nature and you're with yourself, then it's just a dialogue, hopefully with your authentic self and not your conditioned self. And that's where you resolve a lot of the issues of who are you, why were you born, what is the significance of this day compared to yesterday? Did you waste a day or a week or a month or a year because you were engaged in following your insecurities, and that never leads you to a good place, making decisions that you should not have said yes to and saying no to ones you should have said yes to, and giving you an opportunity to live your life in reverse, to take a look around, now that it's behind you, and say, why did I choose this? What was in my mind? Who was in my life? Why would I do this? Would I do it today? And if not, why not? What lesson can I learn going forward? That's what solitude gives you. You can't be in solitude if every other second you're looking at your cell phone, on a telephone, in front of a computer, or in front of a television, or busy getting somewhere like a maze of rats, rushing to something. It really is not significant to who you are as an authentic being, but rather simply pays the bills, including long commutes. And you're not going to be in solitude, even though you're alone in your car, because more often than not, if you're in that car, once again, you're on a speakerphone, you're on the radio. We have a really hard time being alone with ourselves. It scares the hell out of us. Most people, the last thing they can tolerate. And younger people, no, they're not going to handle it. I remember once when I was a kid, probably around 10 years old, there was a woman named Hattie, Haddie, who lived at the end of our block. I lived in a little 1,100 square foot house that's still there. And everyone had a little different way of looking at life on our block, but it was mainly older people. And we were the young kids on the block. And I really enjoyed going to this woman's house. She was a retired school teacher. And in my hometown, you didn't have to retire. It was not mandatory. So we had people teaching at 80 years old. In fact, I had people who teaching me who taught my older brother, 5 years older than me, Howard, taught my mother and father. They taught multiple generations. And these were considered the wise and patient men and women. They always had time for you. And this is what Hattie did. So I'd go up there, and she had a backyard. And it's one of those magical backyards. It was the same size of all the other backyards, but it just was filled with flowers and honeybees and little fountains and a little tiny goldfish pond. And she would sit there on a swing, and she'd give me a cup of sassafras tea with some honey in it and a cookie. And she said, now, what's on your mind, Gary? And I'd ask her about things. And my mother said, never filter the truth. So I'd ask her, I said, what's it like being old? I'm 10 years old asking a person who's probably 75. And she said, well, you get the benefit of having lived a full life and meeting a lot of wonderful people and using your skills to help those people. And she said, so that's what it means And I would always go to her rather than everyone else who was too impatient, didn't have the time, or saying, oh, God, here comes Gary. He's got another, stupid question. But she was always patient. So just imagine that wonderful generation. That was the greatest generation, the one who were born before the Great Depression, who lived through a lot of hardships, but still maintain a sense of manners, morals, ethics, civic duty, caring about others, always volunteering for whatever was needed. There are people doing that today, probably about 10% of the population. That's a lot of people. You're talking about 32 million people. That's more than live in New York State. It's almost as many as live 39 million in California. So it's not that we don't have a lot of good people doing good things because they love society, they care about it, they're deeply impassioned, but that also means you got 90% of the American population, or 300 million people, who are not giving themselves the opportunity to have that inner reflection, to go deep within themselves, find that quiet moment and reflect. Because it's only in those deep reflective moments that those epiphanies, those wonderful moments of enlightenment occur. Virtually all of my ideas, my creations, inventions come in these quiet moments. Generally when I'm gardening or landscape architecture is my passion. I put up some photos of my home, the gardens in my home, I should say, not the home. So you just see that was a sandlot. There were only 2 trees. That's it, 2 trees on my property when I bought it. And it was what I could afford at the time. It was just a sandlot. Now look at it. And everything there I did, but I was always thinking, because you're communing with nature. You're there, you're with nature. Here's what Jennifer Stitt has to say on this. She says, in 1840, Edgar Allan Poe, he's a famous poet, described the mad energy of an aging man who roved the streets of London from dusk till dawn. His excruciating despair could be temporarily relieved only by immersing himself in a tumultuous throng of city dwellers. He refuses to be alone, Poe wrote. He's the type and the genesis of a deep crime. He is the man of the crowd. Now, reflect for a moment. How many people are afraid to be alone? They want to be watching television because they're connected. Everything's passive. Walking up and down the streets or going someplace with lots of people, you're not connected with them. Like many poets and philosophers through the ages, Poe stressed the significance of solitude. It was such a great misfortune, he thought, to lose the capacity to be alone with oneself, to get caught up in the crowd, to surrender one's singularity to mind-numbing conformity. 2 decades later, the idea of solitude captured Ralph Waldo Emerson's imagination in a slightly different way. Quoting Pythagoras, he wrote, "In the morning solitude, that nature may speak to the imagination, as she does never in company." Emerson encouraged the wisest teachers to press upon their pupils the importance of periods and habits of solitude, habits that made serious and abstracted thought possible. This is the most interesting part of this little script, and it's over then. In the 20th century, quote, the idea of solitude formed the center of Hannah Arendt's thought, a German Jewish immigrant who fled Nazism and found refuge in the United States. She spent much of her time studying the relationship between the individual and society. For her, freedom was tethered to both the private sphere and the public and political sphere. She understood that freedom entailed more than human capacity to act spontaneously and creatively in public. It also entailed the capacity to think and to judge in private, where solitude empowers the individual to contemplate their actions and develop their conscience, to escape the cacophony of the crowd, to finally hear herself think. Now think about this for a moment. I'm Gary Null. I want to thank you all for being with us today. We look forward to sharing more tomorrow. Have a nice day. Now coming right up, U Tree Sleet.